Hey friends, welcome to the Taking Your Next Step podcast from Collegians for Christ. Through each episode, we will journey together focusing on becoming better followers of Jesus. If you're eager, like I am, to follow Jesus Christ and take your next step now by joining us in today's episode. We've been looking at this thought, only you can write your story. We see in Psalm number 90, the prayer of Moses. He said in verse 9, "For all our days are passed away in thy wrath. We spend our years as a tale that is told." And we just begin to see and look and examine about how our lives are like a book, a tale, a story that is written. There's a foreword that is us sharing our dreams, our aspirations. There is a dedication page that we would have to those who have influenced us, impacted our life. And then we go into the content, if you will, of our story. And so each day we write our story one decision at a time. We write our story in sentences. Sentences make up paragraphs. Those paragraphs make up chapters. There are certain events that come in life that close a chapter and begin a new chapter. Maybe it was graduating high school and going into college. Maybe it was graduating college and then going into the vocation. Maybe it's stopping one vocation and going into another. Maybe it's marriage. Maybe it's the death of a family member. Maybe some events, chapters come into your life unwelcomed, unwanted. You never dreamed that would happen, but you still have to write your story, and you do that one decision at a time. The great thing about our story is we are the creator. We are the author, meaning you write what you want to write. You write exactly how, when, everything. You are writing, and there's such creativity in that. Yes, God has an outline for our life. We talked about that, like the table of contents. He has the skeleton for us. This is my overall will, but you have to fill in all the details. But you control that script. And we want to talk about today, as you write your story, the story that only you can write, the story that you're writing right now that other people can read, or when you pass off the scene, as this passage tells us that, hey, if you live to be 70 years old, that's great. And if by reason of strength you live to 80, wow, we understand the average span of life being close to those years. But while you're writing, dream about and write big chapters. You see, dream big. Don't dream small. I hope you do have dreams. I hope you do have goals. I hope you have aspirations, things you would like to see accomplished in your personal life, whether it be in vocation, whether it be in sports, whether it be in academics, music. I hope you never stop dreaming. The Bible tells us where there is no vision, the people perish. Vision is really kind of a dream, an aspiration, goals you're launching forward to, you're reaching out and trying to achieve. So what goals do you have? Hopefully, if you're married, you have goals as a family. You have goals in your vocation. You have goals in your schooling that you're going for right now. Maybe it's just to pass the next class, right? Just to make a good grade on that exam that's coming up next week. Maybe it's to be the best you can in your vocation right where you're at. I heard one person say this: I can tell how big your God is by how big your dreams are, or really how big your prayers are. So I can tell how big your God is just by examining how big your prayers are. When we pray to God, are we asking God, seeking God for the impossible? Are we reaching out in faith, asking God to do what we ourselves cannot do? All that boils down to really who we believe God is. You see, if we know and believe and understand that God is omnipotent, He's all-powerful, we understand that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Everything we see is already His. We understand He can do things that we cannot do. And we understand God has a big vision. I mean, think about what is God's desire here on earth. I mean, it is first and foremost that He is glorified, that He receives worship, but He desires that all men, women, boys, girls will come to the knowledge of a saving faith in Jesus Christ. How will that happen? There'll have to be churches. There'll have to be missionaries. There'll have to be people in their vocation who are witnesses. There'll have to be people in churches and in the community that will be a light, be salt, that will ask God to do great things. You know, James teaches us we have not. Why? Why do we not have? Because we ask not. Why would we not ask God? Because we're not dreaming big. Because we don't believe big chapters can be written. Maybe we lack a little bit of faith. What did Jesus say about that? Do you remember the passage when he said to the disciples, look, if you had faith as a grain of a mustard seed, this tiny, tiny seed, if you had just that much faith, you can move mountains. So it's not exactly about the amount of faith that you and I have, but that we do have faith. And so what I'm talking about dreaming about and writing big chapters is about having faith. It's about trusting God to do what you or I cannot do on our own. You see, we have not because we ask not. And that ties right in. I can tell how big your God is by how big your dreams are. So I say God size it. You know, you roll through Mickey D's and you do what? You upsize it. You large size it or whatever it is. What are we doing? We're going big in that lunch or in that drink or in those fries. Give me those big fries, right? But why not God size it? Meaning go big. Ask God for something that maybe seems a little stretchable, a little impossible. Why? Because God loves that. When He can be glorified. And see, when we're asking Him to do something we cannot do and we are going to give God the credit, people know there's no way you did that. There's no way that I did that. The Bible goes on to say without faith it's impossible to please God. And so we're talking about dreaming about and writing big chapters. Now, everybody's big may be different than another person's big. And when I'm saying big, I'm not necessarily saying that it needs to be in the newspaper, that it needs to catch everybody's attention, that in order for it to be big, it needs to be some worldwide movement. Those are great, and maybe that is your big chapter. But understand, anything in faith is big. So big may be you trusting God to go to school. You trusting God to, as you know, you're supposed to leave this vocation and you're going to surrender your life to full-time ministry. You're going to surrender your life to work at this nonprofit for a fraction of your salary. You're doing what? You're exercising faith. You're trusting God. Or God's put a burden on your heart to do this in the community, to reach people, to impact people, but you're a little nervous, right? Maybe it's to help the homeless. Maybe it's to help addicts. Maybe it's to help some elderly. Maybe it's to whatever. Maybe it's to teach a Sunday school class. Maybe it's to lead a small group Bible study on your campus or in your dorm. And you're going, I don't know. You see, that would be big for you. So dream about that and ask God. Make sure your God looks big when you're praying to yourself and also to others. Why? Because God is infinite. And if God is infinite, then His resources are infinite. His knowledge is infinite. God has a will. Remember, the table of contents in your story, in your book, is God's outline for your life. And can I tell you, God's will is bigger than our will would ever be for our life. And so God desires for you to ask Him. He desires for you to attempt great things. One missionary said this: expect great things from God and attempt great things for God. And so if we're going to attempt great things, we have to precede that by expecting great things. You see, if your expectation, your dreams, your vision is big, then more than likely your attempts are going to follow suit. So as you're thinking about the chapters that you're writing, I don't know what chapter you're in right now. You may be closing a chapter and get ready to start a new one. You may be in the midst of the hardest chapter you've ever written in your life. Can I say I have a chapter that I've slowly finished up that I would say has been the hardest, absolute hardest chapter that I've ever written in my life? But it's a chapter that has grown me more than any other chapter. It's a chapter that I'm learning to trust God greater than in any other chapters. And so I don't know what chapter you're in. Maybe it is one of those difficult chapters. So what do? You keep writing. You keep writing one decision at a time. You know you control the script. You keep pushing forward. You keep dreaming big and keep seeking God, asking God to help you. And many times, I heard this past week, many times it's not asking God to remove our circumstances, to fold up the chapter, to allow us to write a brand new chapter, but not not asking God to remove us from our circumstances, but rather asking God to use us in our circumstances. So that chapter you're writing may be that difficult one. It may be that you're going into one that you're not exactly excited about. What are we to do? Ask God to use you. You say, how is he going to use me? Ask God big, great things. Things that you say, well, I don't know if that could even ask God, seek God, because without faith it's impossible to please God. And God is pleased. As we take that verse and flip it around, that means God is pleased when we exercise faith, and God desires to meet us where we're at. So what do we want to do as we write our chapters? We want to dream about and write big chapters. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If this podcast has been helpful to you, we would love for you to share it with a friend or subscribe so that you can stay up to date on the latest studies. You can connect with Collegians for Christ online for more information and resources at cfccampusministry.com.